Hello, I'm Jesse Rope, and I'm going to take you through this scene I made entirely from the Penguin Grenade Raw Magic Library. Paul has put together a collection of really creative and evocative ingredients that provide a really nice foundation to construct magic and ability designs with. Paul really nailed that elusive goal of gathering sounds based on like what they evoke rather than what they literally are. I always have trouble with that, but I was just listening through this and many of his other libraries, and I shake my head because I don't know where he gets the ideas for this stuff. It's great content. As you will see as we get into the session, they don't require a lot of work to get you to really exciting places. But before we dive into the individual layers of the session, I wanted to take you through my process for this assignment. Having such an open-ended task as like making a magic sound can be really daunting to me without some kind of roadmap. So the first thing I set out to do was to figure out the techniques that I wanted to showcase in the video, as well as some scenario ideas. But the first kind of pre-pro task I did was to go through the entire library and favorite sounds I heard that were particularly evocative. And even though I didn't really know what I would precisely use them for, they just struck me as demanding to be used somewhere. I think that's a really great practice whenever I pick up a new library, not only to familiarize myself with content, but to also kind of shortlist the particular gems in any batch of content. So for the scenario, I settled on a scene where strands of magic are called into existence and then funneled into an object in order to enchant it. I thought this would give a nice mix of sustained and impactful moments. It turned out to be a lot more work than just a portal sound or a force push or something. And for the techniques, the main one I wanted to showcase was how I personally set up kind of a poor man's sound miner processing rack in Reaper to process source while browsing it in the Media Explorer. This isn't a particularly novel concept, but this is how I achieve a similar result with some added benefits of it being entirely inside Reaper instead of a separate process. So if you didn't know, you can preview your Media Explorer through any track inside your session. And the way I have this set up is that the source feeds into all three of these effects processing buses simultaneously, which in turn feed into these mastering or shaping buses simultaneously. So I've created multiple parallel processing racks as well as multiple mastering racks depending on the type of content that I'm working on. The processing step focuses on mangling and manipulating the sound into something unrecognizable, tuning it to the task and the palette at hand. And then the mastering chains focus on shaping that result into something like an impulse or a whiz-by, or just keeping it steady. So this allows me to swap out both the processing techniques and the shapes as fast as I can switch the source running through them. These chains can get pretty hefty, and I have the Reaper settings set to not process muted tracks. Now this kind of unstructured raw processing is not really my forte, and I can personally find it really draining, and I'm prone to wormholing on an unfamiliar plugin or something and losing momentum. So when I'm doing this kind of work, I try to have a very clear shopping list of coverage needs, and I also set a timer to make sure that I keep things moving. So after I wrote that scenario, I wrote down some of these items that I felt like I needed to develop with this processing chain, and I set a timer for about 10 to 15 minutes per item to keep me moving through it. Since I'd already flagged my favorite sounds over here, I started with those, and I could pretty quickly find a way to shape them to apply them to this list. So doing this live a little bit, I found this compressed air, which gives a nice airy, slidey movement. And in the steady mastering, it is what it is, but you can quickly change that to a buy. Or an impulse. Or if I don't really like this delay anymore, I can change it to something else. So depending on the type of sound I'm working on, I'll either grab it straight out of the global sampler here and put it in my source drawer here, which I'll get back to, or I can pull it out from the media browser, copy the effects chain, and then just paste it directly onto the item. While it's easier to grab sounds from the global sampler, sometimes I hear something that is in the ballpark, but needs some tuning later on, or there's something about the processing that I want to manipulate once the sound is in the scenario, rather than baking it in. Now, most of the time, I do that rack processing stage in an entirely separate session and separate sitting from my edit and design sessions, but this task was small enough that I just kept everything together. To keep things from getting too messy while I'm editing, I'll often use what I call source drawers to hold a bunch of source that I think might be useful for what I'm going for, but it's not ready to like hit the edit timeline. So right now I'm going to minimize my edit stuff. And I'm going to open the source drawer, and I'm going to open my processing rack and switch back to my normal screen set. So while I'm processing stuff, I'll put it up here in the drawer, roughly the place that I think it might be used. And then when I'm ready to move from source generation to editing, I can pull out source when I need it, put it right here, let's say, and then hide the source drawer again. And this is achieved just by assigning these collection of tracks to track groups and then using custom actions like these to show and hide those track groups and then mute them when they are hidden as well. So after I completed the first pass on my shopping list, I still needed some kind of temporal guide without a video reference that would put some stakes in the ground as to when things were going to happen in relation to each other. So I recorded a vocal sketch, which let me drop in some markers to the session to edit around. Yep, okay, you get the idea. So these cues turned into the markers that you see here. And as I got further along, I did end up adjusting the timing a little bit, but it's pretty close to how I first performed it with my voice here. At this point, the editing stage was pretty straightforward. I roughed in the major beats with the source that I had available while keeping track of ingredients that I felt were missing for a second visit to the source well later on. I find it important to separate the raw source processing from the editing of that source, again, to just keep things from getting bogged down. All right, so let's dive in and see what we can find for this first chunk. We open the scene with three kind of appearances of magic, some touches, and the idea was to have three separate kind of strands summoned and then swirl together and combine into a bigger strand before that strand gets kind of like shunted into an object. So here's what just that sequence sounds like. Cool. So these first three touches here, anything that has the name with SMR at the beginning was a pull from the global sampler here. Same with this stuff with the .jsfx on it. So that was a pull from the source generation session. The items with the cat ID still intact are pretty much direct pulls from the library. I liked how those touches turned out. The layers are roughly in order of frequency. Got some nice little like ring mod, high frequency bite at the top. So got some ring mod, and then that was probably like a traveler by Doppler to give that shape to it. Not very good with my fades here, it looks like. Nice sparkle here without plugins. We have Again, that kind of like flip right at the top, that's kind of a key indicator to me that that was a Traveler impulse. And then I added some crystallizer here to give it just some more scattered debris sense. We have a tone layer. This goblet, nice, good stuff. Really good sound. Pitched up a little bit. And then we've got some bassy effects. Give it a little bit more carry and yeah, presence there. This jet of air, compressed air. Again, Traveler giving us a nice impulse there, and I'm shaping it. What am I doing? Yeah, I am both adding and subtracting transients because that's how you do it. Nice whoomp here, overdriven, and this guy is just pitched down. Stick thump, whoosh whistle, such a good sound. Just pitch. Perfect. That's all you need. So we've got those touches, and then they kind of spawn in these strands. So I didn't really like how these came out. I think that they don't really have an individual distinct identity as much as I would have liked them to. And the other thing that I was really struggling with was finding a way to spin these strands around the head from basically being stationary in the world at a given spot and then starting to spin. I tried to use the spatializers and some other surround panners and stuff like that that just didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. I settled on using an 8-channel GRM Doppler, converting that 8-channel to first order ambisonics, and then that first order ambisonics back to binaural. So I guess you'll be the judge whether or not that actually worked, but I would also love to hear what other people do to kind of get that sense of stuff spinning around the head. And then I think I have like another pan man coming in at the very end to just kind of give it a little chop. Yeah. And for this combination layer, I took the strands, kind of pitched them a little bit to make a more unified sound. Then the processing at the end to kind of pull things together. I have this Things motor, which is a tremolo, and it's got this nice button that you press the button and it kind of like slowly ramps in the speed, which I super like. I also kind of pitched it down and then narrowed the width over time. Can't remember which layer I did that on, in order to kind of give the sense of it narrowing in towards an object instead of spreading out. Moving on from the magic sources, I had a layer here to kind of help sell the combining of them a little bit better, again, some more movement. Not a lot of additional processing here other than what I did in the rack to kind of give us the initial layers. Then the snick and the impact here. I liked those. Let's see what we got going on here. So in the snick, this same overdriven symbol that used in the touches at the beginning, and then just some like real overloaded other components. I'm not even sure what they are. Some tears or rubs. Great. And then just drive them to shit. Yep. Then this was something just coming out of a sound miner rack. Yeah, one of those. Spiffing them up. Yep. The Epic Impact Rack Impulse from Traveler. Yep, that's straight out of the sampler. Not sure what else we got there. Yeah, I like the flangey drag, but this was just the cardboard. Yep, just this. Run through Traveler and some flanger and some plate verb. Dope. Yep, same stuff. Some Echo Boy on that, it sounds like. This one has some effects to show. Nice thunder sheet here. And yeah, putting on a gong amp and some extra plates here. The gong amp gives you that extra sort of like metallic resonance to it. I love that. So for the remaining layers, I already played you the combined magic up here. Similar to this little combined magic sweetener, I have an enchant magic sweetener here. And a snick layer. And you can really hear it by itself, but you don't really hear it all together. I heard this hamster at the beginning, or when I was going through the library, and knew it had to go in somewhere. So that's just raw hamster right in the middle of the session. Yep, it's in there. It's in there, and it's great. So the remaining layers here, we've got an object hit, an impact sweetener, same kind of stuff from the impact verb before. The object hit is pretty much unprocessed stuff straight from the library. Oh, except for this hamster scream. Yep. Don't think that's what that is. Glass and rock, and then the power rumble here. This turned out a little bigger than I wanted it to, especially for such a small object that we heard like tinkling here in this layer. But I got a little too much fun with wave shaping. The wave box, awesome distortion. I love the warmth that it gives. And then just like plating the shit out of that afterwards. Ugh, love that. Yeah, so I just enjoyed that sound too much to let it go. And that's about it. Let's listen to the sequence one more time. So one other thing you might have seen me doing when I was walking through the session was unfreezing and freezing tracks. Freezing is pretty standard to many modern DAWs, and Reaper has its own built-in freeze. It's basically a stem bounce and less of a freeze. So what I really want from a freeze is to offline all the processing on a track or a group of tracks to free up resources for other things. There are quite a few different custom freeze actions here, and I didn't really find one that did exactly what I wanted. The closest thing that I found was this outboarder script here. The Archies are also pretty similar. So this bounces it down in place, and it also disconnects the sends to the track so that you're only hearing this track now. But what I noticed was when you're playing this, all of the children tracks are still being processed, even though they aren't like actually routed anywhere. So that was my first problem with it. The second problem was that even though it says freeze on the item, it doesn't really call itself out as being frozen very well, and you can get yourself into trouble if you try to unfreeze a track when you've accidentally edited the frozen item. Sometimes it's okay if there was nothing on the track to begin with, like this was just a folder, so it's not going to be a problem, but you can get yourself into trouble otherwise. So I made a custom action that tries to solve all the issues of messing up a frozen item, freeing up resources from children tracks, and also trying to raise the visibility that the item and track in question are actually frozen. So running it, bounces it out, makes the frozen item white, locks it so you cannot move it. You can still mix and add plugins and everything that you want on here. And I'm having it add this little icon to the track itself. I could also color the track white, but then that messes up the track coloring later on when I wanted to unfreeze it. And you can add your own track icons inside the Reaper resources path. And we've also freed up all the resources because we've toggled a mute on all of the children tracks. So your tracks are still there, they are just hidden. So if you have the Reaper setting enabled where you don't process muted tracks, that will give you all of your resources back. You can also add additional plugins to a frozen track. So there's the new plugin, safe when you unfreeze. And the unfreeze is pretty much the mirror of those steps, restoring all of your tracks exactly the way they were, and giving you back all of your hungry plugins. All right, hope you got something out of that. I don't make videos like this at all, if that wasn't apparent, so thanks for sticking with me, and I'm sorry if I went too fast. Also, thanks to Paul for this armory concept and gathering all these amazing ideas from people. I'm super stoked to go watch all the other videos now because I was too nervous to watch them before I submitted my own. All right, see you out there.